I'm gonna start recording because it's hilarious. I'm gonna do that real quick.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to
Yeah.
at least. So
Okay.
everybody, this is Jake. We tried to do a thing a while back and it messed up. So this is pre-recorded. I'm gonna post it on the regular schedule. So Jake, I have you as down as a storyteller, and we kind of had talked about this. Why do
Yes.
you like that phrase over something like dungeon master or what's the other one? Game master.
Game master. That's the usual other one. Like, yeah, because storyteller comes from the old World of Darkness, like Vampire the Masquerade and those games and whatnot. But I like storyteller better as a term because I think it gets you in a good headspace for what I consider to be good
Oh no.
gaming role playing games. Oh no! Oh no!
Your audio went out on my side.
Did
So
it?
yeah, you went a
Can you hear
weird
me?
glitch. I can hear you. You just had like a weird like pause back. Who knows?
That's strange.
Yeah,
It was working so well. It's immediately as soon as you start recording.
a little weird. Yeah, weird hiccups. And your Skype wants to
Yeah.
keep jumping around my feed for some reason. It just won't stay put. I'm gonna lock it and see if it'll stay locked.
Yeah,
Uh,
hopefully.
so so go back over again. So it's an old term from White Wolf, right?
Yes, yeah, from World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade and those kinds of games. Like in all their games, instead of having DM, it was storyteller.
Yeah, and I think if it at the very least when I look at the word really fits with the vampire game, like really well.
hmm Yeah, yeah.
Like if it's
Well,
that,
Vampire was very like um, that gothic punk or whatever.
yeah,
It had very overwrought like romantic, and I mean romantic in like the literary sense, like that kind of tone.
fucking baroque kind of
Um,
stuff.
yeah, it was a little like modern baroque. Yeah.
Right,
hmm
very like flowery.
Right, right.
I remember a friend played, and he said he was playing vampire, and they have gone like maybe like a month or two, maybe more than that, and
hmm
they were all still human.
Wow,
I was like,
that's unusual.
yeah, 'cause it was they played like cops and they're investigating things. I was like, Jesus, yeah. Usually you start out as a vampire.
Right, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like that's all backstory. Why would you want to play as a filthy human?
Yeah,
Like,
for real.
yeah.
So I really wanted to focus in today on like storytelling and like
hmm
in our tabletop. So I wanted to go
Yeah.
over the time where you had me play like a mole and
Oh,
how that method works and where because you did it somewhere else too, and you came to an
oh, yeah.
impasse that said for us to move forward for this to work you have to be in on it, like and we have to work together,
hmm
like you are a
Yeah,
controlled NPC essentially.
yeah. Well, like so I've done it a couple of times now, and like it's the deal of like so there is a kind of like classic RPG horror story, right? Where you will have one of the players in the party who decides at some point that they're going to work against the party. And like the horror story side of it is like a player decides to do this with no preface and basically becomes a giant wang rod and like starts stealing from the party at every possible opportunity or like trying to murder them in their
Yep,
sleep
yep,
or whatever.
that
And it
happens and it's
immediately turns
terrible.
into
Yep.
yeah, and it turns into PvP and it's fucking awful. Um, but you can do it. And it can be done. It can be done not only in a way that works, but in a way that's really, really fun. If the DM is in on it and everyone understands what the purpose of that is narratively. Because the idea is like you want everybody at the table to have fun and create a story together that they're all going to enjoy. And so if you want to do it that way, the optimal setup there is the DM and the player are conspiring together, and the player understands that their role is essentially an NPC. And what that means is like, okay, in our game it was a Star Wars game, and like it was a very classic Star Wars game. We had Jedi, we had a scoundrel, we had like a noble character, and
we had a Sith
yeah,
on my character
had a
sheet
Sith.
that said Sith.
Yeah, it had, yep, yeah, and you were a Sith, and we're actively working against the party, but we were coordinating how you were working against the party, and the idea being that eventually, when things went wrong, and when ultimately that would be revealed to the party, your job was to lose, like, and not necessarily to lose, just like, be a punching bag, give them some challenge or whatever, but that your ultimate task was to provide a dramatic betrayal, and then be punished for that betrayal. Because the game is an ensemble, right? Like, sure, it's about everyone at the table.
I'm not sure how that would have worked with that party.
I think it would have been fun.
Okay.
I think it would have been cool with that party. I think it would have been cool. We just didn't get to it. Like, we got to part of it. Like, we got to the part where you there was like a whole murder investigation, and you were screwing with the murder investigation in really smart ways.
I remember I had killed the character, and then
you'd killed an NPC,
and then I made it look like a robbery. I probably was like, no, I need to make it look like a robbery, like they took something. And then when I was back with our party, I remember saying, hey, look at these shelves. They must have been looking for something. And then someone's like, cool. Yeah. And then turned and like, let's do it.
And then, and they just completely ignored it.
Yeah. I remember there's a moment you and me were like, oh, that was easy. I was worried.
I was like, man, I was expecting we were going to have to do more.
They're going to investigate this murder. I was like, all right, I got to make sure I cover all my tracks. I seen Law and Order and CSI enough to go, all right, I got to fake out the counter. And none of it came up.
Well, and like there's I think too, the other bit about it is like that stuff with like you killing the NPC happened off camera for the rest of the players.
That's true.
Like they weren't there for that scene. We played that separately, and they got to deal with the aftermath of it. And I think that's part of it, is like your coordination with the player has to be good enough that you're both able to ad-lib some, but you can keep a lot of the duplicitousness off the table until it's time to reveal. And once you reveal it, then you can, then it goes into like pseudo PvP, and you're supposed to have the battle, but you're also supposed to kind of lose. And it can be great. Yeah.
I was gonna say the other time you did it, it was, or were about to do it. Wasn't it their kind of idea?
It's sort of. So the most recent time I tried to do it, and sadly Corona screwed this game, so we didn't get to get all the way to the end of it, although we got really close. A player came to me, and the game had already started. This is a game I was running at the university, so it was an open table. So for university students, and most of the people who played were either completely new to RPGs altogether, or had only played like 2 or 3 games of D&D.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And nothing else. Like I don't think anybody there had more than 10 sessions experience.
They didn't play Rifts or Big Eyes Small Nose. Like, come on, man.
No.
Noobs.
And so I know. So this kid comes to me after the game is already in progress, and this is like before Christmas, and was like, okay, well, I'd like to play in the game. And I was like, cool, what do you want to play? He's like, I would like to play a warlock. I'm like, okay, cool. I was like, well, there's several different warlock patrons in my setting that you could have, and I was kind of running down the list. I was like, well, there's this one, and there's this one, and I was like, and I got to one, and that patron, I stopped, and I was like, because what this player didn't know is that patron was part of an ongoing plot that I had already seeded in the game. And I told him, I was like, I can tell you about this next patron, but if I tell you about this next patron, there are things you would know about that are spoilers for the game, which means that if I tell you about this patron, you're actually signing up to be a bad guy. Like, you're signing up to betray the party. And I said, and that's fine. I'm not going to say no to that. But if you do, we need to have an understanding that your job is to lose in an awesome way. Like, your job is to fight the party and lose at some point. And I was like, but I can't tell you why unless you've already agreed that that's your mission.
Like you gotta, all right, you gotta be in on it. You have to be all the way in on it.
Right? Yeah, and of course, like, and the thing about this is, if you present it to a player that way, as a DM, or if a player could be a character, did I cut out again?
Yep, I think it's when I mess with the file.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it makes sense when I save a PSD and it updates. It's a little bit of a skip, so that makes all the sense in the world. Sorry about that.
That's okay. But yeah, so like if a player comes to you even as a DM and says, "Oh, I want to play an evil character. I want to be a bad guy or whatever," if you include them and kind of tell them, okay, I'm gonna let you do it. In fact, I'm gonna help you do it, with the caveat that this is now your role. Players usually go along with that. Players are usually overjoyed to do that because now they're in on game secrets. They're like 1/5 of a DM.
Who doesn't want to play the heel? Point. Like, it's fun.
Right, yeah, playing heel is awesome. Yeah, totally. And we did like we did stuff like once this guy started playing, it was awesome. So like I had moments where so right off the bat, like the half of the party that he was with, like they go into a town and they meet up with these fortune tellers, these quote unquote fortune tellers, who seemed super benign, and they were like they basically acted like country bumpkins. But they were actually also other warlocks of this dude's patron. And so at one point, the players all go to sleep, and I grab his character, the player, and I'm like, okay, I need you to come outside with me for a second. We go out of the room, and I start talking with him, and basically I tell him that these other two warlocks, who everybody in the party is assuming are just country bumpkins, come to him in the middle of the night, and they're like, we know who you are, and like, hey, let's sit this, that kind of, like, that kind of thing. And they have a whole conversation about their evil plans and what they're doing. And when we come back into the room, and what I told the player was, I was like, okay, now all the other players are going to wonder what the hell just happened. So here's what we're going to do is when we get back in the room, I'm going to fast forward to when everybody wakes up in the morning, and you're going to pretend you had a horrible nightmare. Because otherwise they're going to be like, oh, did he have combat? Did he talk to somebody? Did he, have plot or whatever? I'm like, no, you're going to... Like, I'm going to tell them that it's hard to wake you up, and then when they wake you up, it's going to be like a horrible nightmare, right? Play it off. And so we go back into the room, and we do that, and immediately one of the players at the table, this is exactly what he says, oh, I bet somebody just had a meeting with their patron.
That's funny.
And they just totally bought it. Like, they didn't even question it further than that. They were like, oh, it's just the DM doing cool, like, backstory stuff for this character. And I'm like, yep, exactly, totally. 100%. How clever you are, player.
It works. Sometimes it works out. Like, even when people have an inkling of it, if you build it correctly, the payoff works.
Yeah.
Because it's the payoff. Like, you know the Avengers are going to win.
Yes.
And they're going to save the day. So let's let it happen and move forward. And just make it the best way possible.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's supposed to be like, it's that thing of establishing with the player. It's like your job as the heel is not to win forever. Even if you have a momentary victory, your job is not to crush your fellow party members. Your job is to provide this turn that they will then talk about later. That will become part of the narrative of the story for them forever. And like, and a lot of, I think, the best, like, things you can do as a DM have that element to them of not thinking about them mechanically or in terms of like a gamist way of thinking of them narratively, of thinking of them as ways to improve a story.
Yeah, 'cause that's the whole point. You gotta enjoy the ride.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I think you can actually get away with stuff that, like I said, I think we were talking before we started recording, like there's a lot of scenarios that end up as, like, RPG horror stories that people talk about being so terrible that if they had been handled from the perspective of this is a intentional narrative, and we're going to take moments in the game to step out of game, not, to literally step out and do meta and address the player and be like, this is a story. This is how this is the context in which this event is occurring. You can get away with a lot more. So, like, for example, the home game I'm doing, you remember Megan, right? So, Megan in my home game, she's playing this noble's daughter. Her family is her father is like the marquis of this city or whatever, or of this nation. And when we started the game, I had everybody. I said, as part of your backstory, I was like, you are all on the road coming from the wilderness back to the capital. I was like, I don't care why. You figure out why, but you're on this caravan, you're protecting this caravan, and that's what you're doing. And her reason that she came up with was that she had been on she's like an elf, so she'd been on an elven version of Rumspringa. But for elves, it's like for a decade, because it's, because they live so long. And the idea being that, like, this was her, like, journey into the world to become mature, to become an adult, and that she had been called home early and didn't know why. And yet she had no clue why, and I was like, okay, cool, so that's a big hole that I get to fill. And what I filled it with was, she comes home, and she goes into her family mansion or whatever, and her mother comes in and tells her, and this is the Marchioness, so she's, like, her mother is a fairly well-to-do and powerful noble, and is like, okay, look, here's the deal. Our family is being investigated for treason. And in order to get out from under that, we need to do something that will ingratiate us with the king, or make us closer allies with the king, so that we can get out from it, because it's like the king's spy master who's doing it. And she's like, I found a way to do it, and the way to do it is a political alliance by marriage. And the obvious thing here being, her mother was going to marry her off into another family. And at this moment, as soon as I finished saying that sentence, I was like, pause. I was like, and Megan and I had a talk out of character real quick, where she was like, I'm not sure how to feel about this, because, I've had DMs before who kind of wanted it to go this way, and I was like, oh, no. I was like, hold up. I was like, we're going meta for a second. I was like, let me assure you, there is not a wrong answer to this problem. I was like, I did not put this challenge in front of you with only options for you to go one way. I was like, you have the option. You can say, hell no, I won't go. Yeah. You can say, maybe. You can say, absolutely, and I guarantee you all of those three things have story, and I am prepared for you to say any of those things. So, now that we've established it, and this is the thing, is like, DMs don't often realize that you can just pause the game real quick and cut in and give the player meta text, and that it can actually help your game. And in this case it did. Like, she immediately was calm with the idea. She's like, okay, cool. Okay, I get it. And she kind of thought about it for a second, and she ended up going like a halfway point. She was like, okay, I'll entertain this idea. And it's been an ongoing plot thread where she's still relating to that guy, and still, we're like 8 sessions later now, and she's still not 100% sure how she's going to finish it off.
That's fun.
And like, it is fun. It's super fun, and like, it's become this ongoing thing with her character that, I don't think I wouldn't put that in front of a brand new player. I know Megan, and I know how to talk to her. So I wouldn't put that in front of a brand new player, but I also understand how to preface those kinds of plot points in a way that makes them a lot more me as the DM and the player as the player collaborating to build something, and say, hey, do you want to have this more involved experience in your character's story? Do you want to have this element? And you can say no, and we will handle it, and it will become a perhaps less engaged story emotionally, but it can be still resolved.
Give everybody something to do as a character.
I was like, right. Mm-hmm. And I was prepared for her to say completely no, and that would have been fine. Actually, there were plot points that would have spawned out of that. But the fact that she entertained the idea allowed me to do like one of the cooler scenes that I've done as a DM, because what happened later is like they go on a date, like she and her betrothed. And I have her meet him in like a plaza, and I picked out a piece of music because she's a bard. And I picked out a piece of music, and I was like, when you come to him on the plaza, this is what he's playing. And I send her the piece of music, and this is like a one-on-one session, and like she plays it, and it's this really like haunting kind of melancholy viola solo piece, and that's how it starts. And then we kind of continue to role play it, and then like after about 10 minutes, and this is one of my like recent best moments as a DM, after about 10 minutes of like role playing this encounter, she goes meta for a second, and she's like, this is actually a really hard decision. And I was like, good, that's how it's supposed to be. So that's cool. You know, not everyday DMing is like that, but that was a good day DMing. It's
always more fun when everybody's like working together and it is not adversarial.
I recently realized what the bit that people miss about playing in tabletop RPGs is that you're playing as a party, right? What is the definition of a party? The definition of a party, and I finally figured out this is the right definition. This is the definition that if more people uploaded it, it would solve a lot of problems at the table before they occur. The definition of a party is a group of people who have goals and cannot achieve those goals alone.
Yeah.
Note, that does not require them to like each other or to enjoy each other's company or any of those things. And the only thing it requires is that those characters or the players themselves understand that the goals they want to achieve cannot be achieved solo. And as long as they get that, your game is going to run pretty well. Even if you have players who their characters are actively despising each other.
Yeah.
Like, it will still work as long as the players get, I can't do what I need to do without these people.
All the good games I remember playing, we were all working towards a goal together. Well, everybody had their own separate goals and their separate whatevers, but we're all heading towards the same goal. Yeah.
The same direction. Mm-hmm. And you can, that allows you to have like, you can have your like Wolverine anti-heroes. It's like Wolverine's a great example of like, you know, you have Wolverine from the X-Men, and like he's a guy who on paper he's the gruff loner who likes to be alone and enjoys being lonely. Yet always in a team.
Always.
oftentimes kind of like one of the like emotional centers of that team. He's the guy who, when somebody is super depressed and down, Wolverine will be like, let me give you some gruff loner wisdom. Which is not a thing an actual loner would do. Like someone who actually is as misanthropic as Wolverine is portrayed to be would not do that. But the writers of X-Men understand that, well, yes, but in order for this to be an ensemble, as much as he portrays himself, as much as Wolverine is on paper, this dude, he actually isn't. He's actually a team player always.
He has one of the few, he's part of the few team moves, the named team moves.
Exactly. Yeah, he has a team move named after him. Yeah,
he's part of it.
Like he's
only one. I can't think
of
another X-Men team move besides the fastball special. Is there another one?
No, exactly. I don't think. Well, I think there are now, strictly because of like the Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men podcast. But that have names. The only one that has names that has like a canonized name is the fastball special. The fastball special is in the comics. Like, characters in the Marvel universe know what a fastball special is.
Because they talk about it. Yeah. Because when other people do it, it's like, is this another fastball special? Like, they try to rename it or something like that. It always seems to work better when everyone... Yeah. I'm trying to think of the horrible sessions that I've had. And it's mostly like... how did it fall apart? one time
It's
it was
usually,
like personal business.
It's usually, yeah.
And they just beefed with each other. And the other times it was just like long. Like it was just some setup games just take forever.
Yeah, like setups to a game are like you got to figure out a way to make that fun. I do like. Oh my god, one of the things I really do like about 5th edition D&D is because it is so well supported. You have all these really great like third-party apps and things, and so like D&D Beyond has a character creator
nice.
in it, and that's what I use. That's what I use for all my games, and it's fantastic because it basically reduces character building in D&D, which is a complicated process. Like, let's be fair, that is not an easy character building system. No. It's not the hardest one. It's not like, I'm
gonna say Rifts.
It's not Rifts. Yeah, Rifts is a good example. It's not Rifts, but it's not World of Darkness.
OG World of Darkness.
Like, it's just like, World of Darkness is just clicking off little dots.
Is the new World of Darkness the same way still?
But
kinda? Okay.
Kinda.
Okay.
I haven't really gotten into it, but yeah, kinda. As far as I've looked at it. But D&D Beyond reduces that complicated process in 5e to essentially a video game character creation chart, where like you start and you tell it says, here, what race do you want? And then it just stacks all of them. And if you click one, it tells you the bonuses that race will give you. And you're like, okay. And then you click it, and then it goes, all right, now what class do you want? And it does the same thing. And then it opens out that class and it says, here are the options for that class. Pick your option. And it's multiple choice. And when you make it multiple choice, it's so much easier to upload.
You get a blank sheet of paper. Sometimes I did it with a blank loose leaf piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had to like write it all out. And then...
And a 200-page book to flip through.
200-page books.
Yeah.
Then one of the nightmare sessions I remember going with you, he had like all the books. Not only all the books, he wanted us to level up to level 15 or 20 or something like that. Like he was supposed to be a high level.
So it was a high level. Yeah, it was at least level 10. It was at least like halfway up the level ladder, and it was like you can play literally any class, any class or race option out of any of the books. And this was 3.5, and 3.5 had just absurd
I distinctly remember someone, maybe it was you, who ended up as like essentially an alien race, because someone,
and there was it was called an alienist, and what it was a casting class. It was a summoner, but it was like a really weird summoner variant where everything you would summon would like get translated through some horrifying evil dimension, and so when it would come out, basically it's like, okay, I want to summon a cat, and you summon a cat, but instead it comes to you as a cat with like tentacles and 12 eyes,
like demonic,
and
kind of like Cthulhu-esque.
Yeah, it was very. It had lots of like Cthulhu bits on it, grafted onto it, and I mean, like, I was like, that's a cool option, but I think 3 hours of that session were taken up just with building. It was probably longer than that, frankly.
It was just forever, and I was just like, this is too much. But now with the making it like just digital options, you can power through it. You can randomize it, for God's sakes.
And you can they actually have that as an option. You can literally just click a button and it's like, I want a random character, and it will give you a random character. And I'm like, that's pretty good. And it's super, and because it has an interface that is reminiscent of a video game, and modern players have that experience, they upload it so much faster.
They get it.
Much faster.
It's not intimidating, because who hasn't built a Fallout character before? You know,
right?
What I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Fallout, or I mean, shit, even like Bloodborne and Dark Souls, like you have character sheets, like stuff from D&D permeates video games in the background.
The mechanics are all there. Whether or not you get to play with it is up to the game system. Because some people love that nuance, and some people hate it.
Right, totally. God.
Have you played much, like so you say you haven't played much of World of Darkness recently? Because they've re-released some things, right?
No, they've re-released a bunch. We're on like, I guess like I don't know if it's World of Darkness like 2.0 or 3.0. I think it's 3.0 now. I think they've gone back to the well, and because excuse me, there was original World of Darkness, and original World of Darkness ended
That's
in kind of a ballsy way. They actually had, all the games had talked about some crazy apocalypse, and then they were like, and now the apocalypse happens, and I'm like, that's pretty ballsy. Yeah. And then they restarted with like World of Darkness 2.0, which I don't think anybody really liked.
I didn't know what it was.
Or at the very least, that was past the point where White Wolf was seemingly successful as a company, and they just didn't seem to exist much beyond that. And then now it's been resurrected as all good undead things are.
White Wolf has a long history too,
and so now I think. Mm-hmm. And now they're doing another like Vampire the Masquerade like Bloodlines game, so we're getting that later.
The original was fun.
I never played the original, but I heard great things about it, and I'm
it was
bored for
long,
the new one.
I remember correctly, so I didn't get through the whole thing, but what I got to, I was like, I'm digging this a lot.
Yeah, it feels right for the.
So I'm looking over
system.
at because I see my books I don't have a lot because I'm more of a collector of role playing books. So I remember because I have this Street Fighter one by I think it was a White Wolf game, to be quite honest. Yeah,
it is. That was one of their first games.
Yeah,
that was really early.
Fighter, and it had the one of the expansion books of Street Fighter. So there's that one that
I don't have as many of my old World of Darkness books. I still have my like really busted up edition of 3rd edition Vampire. Nice. With like the horribly cracked spine, because there was hardly ever a White Wolf book that didn't have a cracked spine.
Yeah, that's how they're. Yep.
It's just part of their charm. Like this, the busted spines. It's just this. So
you seem to you seem to run a lot more like story driven games. So, do you?
Yeah. I don't run a lot.
Not like puzzles or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I don't. I bet I could count on one hand how many times I've used puzzles. I don't even use traps that often. My games tend to be really narrative and very like intrigue heavy. I'm big on intrigue. I like players. I like what I like doing is, and this is actually part of my general advice for new DMs, because part of the deal was doing the game at the university was to get new people into the hobby. And specifically, like whenever we would finish a session, I would talk to players about how I DM'd that session. Because I'm like, look, at some point I want you guys to start DMing your own games and not just play with me. And so I'm going to tell you how I do everything I do in the game that you think is cool. So like I like putting players in a position where I will drop them into a story basically already in progress.
Okay.
That is happening in the world. The world has a storyline that it is following. And if the players don't interact with that storyline, it will continue, and it will have a beginning, and a middle, and an end. And usually the end will be bad. And then, because I already know what that story is, right? The players come into it. Usually they come in like at the end of Act 1 of that story. And because they come into it, they have to do catch-up. They have to figure out, okay, well, what happened before we got here? And then once they figure that out, then they have to decide, okay, now what do we do about it? But because I already know what the backbone of that story was before the players showed up, now it doesn't really matter what the players do. All I have to do now is react. Which means I tend to be a little. I feel like I end up being more nimble on the ground as a DM, because that way it's like, if the players are like, well, and they throw out some crazy idea for how to handle this problem that I never would have thought of. Like, I don't have to worry about, oh god, this invalidates everything I was going to do today as a DM. I can be like, okay, give me like 60 seconds. And I think about it and I'm like, all right, well, the antagonist is this, and they have this resource, and they're trying to affect this change. If this now happens to them, how will they react? Okay, all right, I know what to do. Okay, let's go.
You have the world built.
And yeah, yes, yeah, and it's surprisingly little that you actually need built in advance. It really is like all you need to know is your major NPCs, what they are trying to do, what their goal is, and what resources they have to affect that. And if you know those things, it's great. And it also allows you to like have bad guys and good guys who are reasonably imperfect, which I think is actually kind of critical as a DM. Like having bad guys who act on incomplete information, just like the players have to sometimes.
That makes sense.
Right? Yeah. Like you'll have I'm trying to think of a good example. So the one with my university game, like they happen upon this town. There's weird stuff happening in this town, and they're like a band of mercenaries, and they break into this keep in the town, find some more crazy evidence of weird stuff going on, and they were like, "So what's the town do?" And I was like, town doesn't do anything, because what I know, because I've already thought about this, is that the town's resources are fairly limited. That most of the people in the town are commoners. Yeah. They're doing bad things, but they're commoners. Now, they have friends in dark places. And what I have the players do is the players overhear a conversation between two of the townsfolk. They're like, well, what are we going to do about these mercenaries in town? They're like, I don't know. These mercenaries are kind of scary. We can't take them. It's okay. A message has been sent. And it telegraphs to the players is like, the townsfolk don't know how dangerous they are. The townsfolk aren't going to screw with them unless they force the issue. But now there's a ticking clock. A message has been sent. Reinforcements are coming that might be dangerous. And it, like, this sets in motion, these things. But it becomes reasonable, right? The players believe it because it makes the world seem... more realistic.
And you have that action's going to happen no matter what. And what they do is like, if they're coming this way, that was the plan. If they do this and this and this, and you just have to just react to it. And there's no, like...
Right. And the only reason the message was sent was because of something the players did, right? Like, because the townsfolk, until the players started messing with things and, like, snooping around, the townsfolk were like, we're just going to pretend everything's fine and just do our own thing, and maybe these mercenaries will just pass on through.
Yeah.
And then the adventure happened. And that ends up being, that's it's part of creating that drama, that narrative, is creating bad guys with a goal, with a focus, but who can screw up and who can have false information, but who also will react reasonably to things that the players do and will react cleverly, so that the players can think, if only we had done this, right? So even their failures feel more legitimate. They don't feel like it's me screwing with them. Mm-hmm. They feel like it's, of course the bad guy would know how to do that.
Or the push went that way.
It makes sense. It's perfectly right. Exactly. Like they can see where it went off the rails.
I remember you saying you at the end of the day actually saved the player's ass way more than you let them just die off.
I've hardly ever had a character death in my games. Yeah, it's really real. I've never had a TPK. I don't intend to start now.
Because I remember sometimes you roll dice, you're like, nope.
That's I've gotten. I think I've gotten to be a better DM because I don't have to do that as much. But yeah, I have done that before, and people don't believe me. But I told them like when we were doing our Trinity games back in college, like. If somebody was doing something dramatic and cool and they made the roll and the dice were just not cooperating and like came up all ones or whatever, I'd be like, that was cockeyed, roll it again. And if you do it fast enough, the players are like, sure, yeah, and they'll roll it again. And the thing is as long as you don't dwell on it and your drama is already there and the players are engaged with your game, they won't remember that you did that. And I've fudged dice because I never ran with a DM screen.
Yeah.
Right? So like whenever I would roll dice, it was what they came up as. And there were times when I rolled something and I was like, ooh, no. And I would literally take it back and re-roll it in front of the players. And later on, years later, like, I saw that there was these online debates about, like, die fudging and whether or not it's cheating and you shouldn't do it as a DM. And I polled my players and I said, hey guys, how did you feel about it when I would fudge rolls at the table? Because you definitely saw me do it. And of like a dozen players who responded to that, only one of them even remembered me doing it. And it was Chris, and he was one of the only other people who DM'd. And he was the only one. He's the only one who remembered me doing it. And in his words, he was like, "It always seemed to work out in our favor, so I didn't really mind." And I was like,
"Yeah," because at that point you're like, if this roll keeps, we end the game. Like everybody, right, all right, turn your sheets, exactly. Make new ones.
Right. Yeah. And I've gotten better about it. I'm better now about proactively putting. I've started calling them trapdoors into my game. So like, for example, the university game, they were coming to a part in the story where they'd done some stuff to people, and I decided these people were going to ambush them and try to take the party prisoner. And I had built this encounter, this ambush, to be deliberately unfair, like critically unfair. It was supposed to be mean, but you never really know, how an encounter is going to work until it's in motion, right? Like encounter design does not stop when initiative is rolled, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, what if this encounter is too easy? I need a way to make it harder in the moment. And if this encounter is just ball-bustingly too hard, I need a way to soften it in the moment. How can I do that? And the ambush was going to be like in these ruins in the middle of the woods. And so what I did was I had them, as they were approaching the place where I knew I was going to spring the ambush, I had them find evidence, like droppings, scat, of like a wyvern in the area. I had them identify it, and like they could tell from the size and like claw marks. And I was like, you think it's a wyvern? And they're thinking, oh god, there's like this huge predator around. That is not the ambush. That is not it. That's my trapdoor. But I've seeded it like about 5 minutes before the ambush happens.
Okay.
And so then the ambush happens, and I have the option now of, if the ambush is too easy, the fighting will draw the attention of the wyvern from somewhere off in the woods, and it will attack. And it will, if it's too easy, the wyvern will attack the players first. And now I have preceded this encounter in a way to make it harder.
Okay.
If the encounter is too fucking hard, if I've made this encounter way, way too hard, the wyvern still shows up, but now it attacks the bad guys first and gives the players a chance to escape.
Oh, you have that amazing Jurassic Park moment with the T-Rex and the raptors.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. You get the T-Rex and the raptors. Exactly. And like, it's funny because I actually didn't have to use either of those because the players surrendered in the ambush.
Oh my god.
But I was prepared, right? Like, and it was funny because like afterwards they asked me about it, and I was like, oh no, that was just all that was there to do. It was a dial that if I knew this encounter was supposed to be hard, if I wanted to make it harder, I could make it harder or easier.
Dependent, yeah.
I could fine tune it, and I did it later. There was a same group. A little later on, they end up, after they'd gotten captured, they were put in like a gladiator arena, right? And they're slowly working their way up this gladiator arena, and the top gladiator is the guy they're about to fight. And I made an encounter that was deliberately hard and really tactical. And I built this guy, and he was nasty. He was just gross. He could do like 6 attacks in a round if certain conditions lined up. Yeah. He did lots of damage. He was really mobile. And they did not have all of their gear with them, so they did not have their own advantages. And before the encounter happened, one of the players who wasn't going to be in that encounter, like they were in the game, but they weren't part of this action. I took them aside and I said, okay, I said, during this fight, um, there is someone helping the party that they don't know about. And it's a diviner. And in D&D 5th edition, diviners have this ability where if somebody rolls a number that they have like 2 rolls that they make at the start of their day that they can replace any other roll with that happens at the table.
Oh, wow.
So like they'll roll 2d20s and they'll get, like, in this case, like I had rolled it previous and the diviner had a 2 and a 17.
Oh, wow.
Which is great because that means they can screw up a roll or they can make a roll much better.
Yep.
And I told this player, I said, okay, there's a diviner helping your party with this encounter. These are the 2 rolls they have. At any point during this encounter, if something's going wrong, if I have critted on one of the players and you don't want that to happen, you can replace that roll with that 2. If one of the players botches a roll on this bad guy and you don't want that to happen, replace it with that 17.
Wow.
And the player said, well, how am I going to do this, without them, like, noticing something weird is going on? And then, and again, like, this harkens back to the days of me fudging rolls in front of players. I said, here's how you do it. I said, when the die roll comes up, whatever that die roll is, if you want to change either mine or theirs, as soon as the roll is called, you lean in and say, actually, no, it's this. And I will say immediately, you're right, it is that. And we will continue on, and I guarantee you, none of the players at the table are going to notice. And it happened. It actually happened.
Oh shit!
Like we start the encounter, and this encounter worked really well. Like, this encounter, it went for like 10 rounds, and the players barely survived, which is the best kind of surviving. Yeah. And they, it was a big, long, really tactical encounter, but like right in the midpoint, somebody botched a really, really critical roll. They needed to make it, and they were like, "No!" And then this player I had in the role of the diviner leans in as, actually, it's a 17. And I was like, "You're right, it is a 17." And we keep going. And after the game was over, only one player noticed.
Wow!
And that player came up to me later and said, yeah, I bet you were just going easy on us. And I was like...
Oh, you paused. Hang on 1 second. Jake. Lost Jake.